Storm drains aren't supposed to breathe. Pipes can gurgle, culverts can burp, manholes can hiss when a truck rolls by, but they don't inhale. They don't pull air in slow and push it back out, damp and warm, like there's a set of lungs somewhere in the dark. The one on Maple Ridge Court did. That's the image that won't leave me alone. Me, crouched over a curb inlet in a quiet Houston cul-de-sac, sun burning the back of my neck, watching muddy water tremble in the throat of a grate, and feeling it exhale on my face. That was the first time I thought, okay, something's wrong with this job. Officially, I'm a stormwater field inspector. In practice, I'm the guy in the faded orange vest driving a white work truck between new subdivisions and old bayous, pretending we can keep a drowning city afloat with clipboards and work orders. Houston's a bowl with a broken rim. The rain comes, the bayous rise, and everyone screams at 311 like we can fix gravity if they yell loud enough. Every morning I log into the city's drainage system. Same ugly blue and white interface, same number in the corner like a blood pressure reading for public outrage. Open drainage requests, priority level. That number is my God. My performance review, my raise, my job all boil down to how fast I can make it shrink. So I learned to cheat. We call it visual closure. If a ticket says clogged inlet and the satellite image looks clear, or last year's street view shows a clean curb, I mark it no issue observed without ever rolling a tire. You tell yourself it's fine. Save gas, save time, get to the worst spots. It's just leaves in the gutter. It's just a little pooling at the corner. Just is the first lie you learn in public works. On the Wednesday, everything started. I came in late. My daughter had a fever overnight, and my wife needed help coaxing Tylenol into a kid who suddenly hated medicine. By the time I got to the yard, the break room coffee had burned down to bitter sludge, and my supervisor, Kessler, was pacing next to my truck. "You see the board yet, Rowe?" he asked, instead of hello. I hadn't. I still had my lunchbox in my hand. "The number," he said. "We got hammered in that storm yesterday. West District is drowning in duplicates. Councilman's office already called me twice." He jabbed a finger toward the building. "Get in there, triage your area, and clear what you can. I want your column under 50 by noon." Under 50. I hadn't seen that in weeks. At my desk, I logged in. The system spit out a list of addresses in short, panicked sentences. Water backing up to the porch. Street flooded to mid-tire. Kids can't get on the bus, intersection underwater. And threading through the list, the same street name over and over. Maple Ridge Court. 7 separate tickets tied to that cul-de-sac, all logged over the last 3 months. Same inlet, same dot on the map. The wording changed, but the dread didn't. Drain smells like dead animals, something moving in the storm drain at night. Water sounds weird, like it's breathing? That last one was from the Saturday before the storm. The resident had actually typed that word, breathing. Normally, I would have rolled my eyes, flagged it low priority, and driven to the big, obvious flood calls. But Kessler's voice was still in my head. Under 50 by noon, councilman breathing down his neck, which meant breathing down mine. And Maple Ridge wasn't far, just a short detour off my usual route. Fine, I told myself. One quick look. Clear 7 tickets in one shot. The subdivision was one of those tidy developments that still smelled like fresh sod and vinyl siding. Identical houses, identical mailboxes, a retention pond hiding behind the last row of fences like a forgotten second backyard. By the time I turned onto Maple Ridge, the storm had left its fingerprints everywhere. Silt rings around driveways, grass bent in one direction, the faint smell of wet drywall from somewhere a little too close to the ground. The inlet sat halfway down the cul-de-sac, right where the curb dipped to guide water in. From the truck, it looked fine. No obvious trash, no branches, no kid's soccer ball wedged in the grate. If I'd followed my usual habit, I would have snapped a photo from the cab, hit the no blockage option, and moved on. Instead, I sighed, climbed out, and walked over. Maybe that breathing line annoyed me just enough to go check. Maybe I still had a little professional pride buried under the shortcuts. Up close, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Drains usually smell like wet concrete, algae, maybe a whiff of oil. This one smelled warm. Not rotten, not chemical. More like the air that rolls out when you crack a dishwasher mid-cycle. Humid, heavier than it should be. I crouched, one hand on the hot curb, and leaned closer. The slots in the grate were black and slick. I could hear the faint trickle of runoff somewhere inside, the echo of droplets. Then the water moved. Not the way it does when a car goes by or a gust of wind hits. It rose in a slow swell, as if something underneath had inhaled. A bubble of murky water pushed almost to the lip of the grate, trembled, and then sank back down. The breath that came out of that pipe hit my face. Damp. Warmer than the outside air by a few degrees. Just enough for my skin to register it as wrong. I flinched backward and almost fell. Jesus, I muttered, heart knocking once hard against my ribs. Okay. I tried to reason it out. Trapped air, pressure equalizing deeper in the line. Some weird interaction between the outfall and the bayou level. There are technical ways to explain a lot of strange behavior in city plumbing. But the smell clung to my nose, and as I stared, I thought I saw something pale just beyond the shimmer of the water. Not a full shape, just the impression of a curve, like the edge of a knuckle seen through frosted glass. I blinked, and it was gone. Behind me, a screen door squeaked. I turned. A woman in her 40s stood on a porch, arms folded tight around herself. Pajama pants, t-shirt with a faded school logo. She watched me like I was already letting her down. "You guys finally came," she called. "That thing's been acting weird for months." I cleared my throat, tried to sound official. "I'm Ethan with Stormwater. Just checking the inlet after the storm, ma'am." She walked a few steps closer, staying safely on her lawn. "My husband says it's just pipes, that it's in my head, but I've heard things down there at 2 in the morning, and that's not pipes." "What kind of things?" I asked, against my better judgment. She hesitated, chewing the inside of her cheek. Like it's sucking the water in slow and then pushing it back out. And sometimes it sounds like a dog caught in there, crying. I looked back at the grate, at the thin line of wetness around the slots that shouldn't still be there now that the runoff had passed. "We've had flooding here before?" I asked. "Not like the other streets," she said. "Just little puddles. But my neighbor says her cat went missing and she heard it under the sidewalk the night it rained." My window of plausible denial shrank another inch. I took a couple of photos anyway, kneeling again, careful not to let my fingers slip through the metal. I could request a camera inspection, note a possible structural issue, kick it up the chain. Slow, bureaucratic, safe. Or I could do what I'd done to 100 other weird complaints. Write something bland, clear 7 tickets in under a minute, and be the hero of my own spreadsheet. "You said you logged this before?" I asked the woman. 3 times, she said. Well, 4 if you count the one where I said it smelled like something dead. They just emailed back that they'd keep an eye on it. I winced. I'd probably been the one who sent that non-answer. Look, I said, I'll put in a note for further investigation. Might take a bit. Our crews are slammed from the storm. But I see the ticket, okay? She stared at me for a long second, trying to decide whether I meant it. Okay, she said finally. Just don't ignore it. Please. I nodded. I meant it when I said it. Back in the truck, I pulled up the work order on the tablet. The box for my notes blinked, waiting. My thumb hovered over the screen. Water level normal. No visible debris. Odor present. Resident reports unusual sounds. Those were the words I should have typed. What I actually put was the usual shortcut, that there was no obstruction, the inlet was clear, and we'd keep an eye on it during future storms. 1 tap and 7 complaints vanished from the board. The number in the corner dropped, a tiny shot of dopamine. I told myself I'd come back. After the big flood calls, after the worst of the mess was handled. The system marked the complaints as resolved, and Maple Ridge Court slid back into the noise. For the rest of the day, that cul-de-sac sat in the back of my head like a stone in my shoe. Every time I bent over another inlet, I remembered that warm breath on my face. By the time I dragged myself home, my daughter was asleep and my wife was half watching some home renovation show, the TV light flickering over stacks of unpaid bills on the coffee table. I kissed her, microwaved leftovers, pretended to listen to the demo guys swing sledgehammers through drywall. Around 9, my phone buzzed. It was the city's alert app. A red banner crawled across the top. Priority drainage, possible entrapment. The address was blurred on the preview, but the street name showed loud and clear. Maple Ridge Court. The line underneath made my mouth go dry. Somebody had reported something with eyes in the storm drain, and there was a child screaming in the background. The address sat on my screen like a verdict. Same cul-de-sac, same inlet, different kind of complaint. My first instinct was denial. It had to be a coincidence. Another house on the street, some teenager messing around, a raccoon stuck where it shouldn't be. People phone in nonsense all the time. Then I tapped the alert open and read the full text. The app didn't mince words. A high-priority drainage call, possible entrapment, caller reporting something with eyes under the water. Hysterical kid in the background. There's a particular kind of nausea that comes from seeing your own negligence translated into official language. All those "will monitor" clicks suddenly look like lies. I gotta go, I told my wife, already reaching for my keys. She glanced over from the couch, remote in hand. Work? Drain issue, I said. Maybe nothing. Well, the rain's not done with us, she said. Text me if it turns into another all-nighter. On the freeway, the sky over Houston was doing that purple bruise thing again. Lightning flickered somewhere past the towers, turning cranes into black hooks against the clouds. The air felt heavier than the last time I'd driven this route, as if the city had taken a deep breath and hadn't decided what to do with it yet. As I turned into Maple Ridge, I saw the lights first. There's something ugly about seeing emergency flashers on a street you've already marked resolved. Red from the fire engine, blue from the cruiser, amber from a city truck, all ricocheting off vinyl siding and wet pavement. Neighbors hovered at the edges, phones out, faces pale in the strobe. I parked at the mouth of the cul-de-sac and grabbed my vest, that thin, reflective little shield I liked to pretend was authority. A firefighter by the engine spotted the city logo on my truck and waved me over. "You stormwater?" he called. "Yeah," I said. "Row." He jerked his chin toward the middle of the street. "Then you'll want to see this." The inlet was now the center of a rough ring of yellow tape. Somebody had set up a portable floodlight but hadn't turned it on yet. It stood beside the grate like a silent judge. A ladder lay abandoned nearby, hinting that someone had briefly considered climbing down. A little boy sat on the curb a few feet away, wrapped in a foil blanket, cheeks streaked with tears. His scooter lay on its side near the driveway. His mother, the same woman who'd watched me that morning, knelt beside him, one arm around his shoulders, the other clenched around her phone. "It's the same drain," I said quietly. The firefighter gave me a sideways look. "You've been out here before?" "Day shift," I said. "Logged some standing water complaints." The lie tasted metallic. "What happened tonight?" I asked. He shrugged, like he'd been replaying it himself. "Kid was riding his scooter. Says he heard his cat under the sidewalk. When he leaned over the grate, he saw eyes under the water. Mom says he almost tried to climb in." "Any injuries?" I asked. "Scrapes. Scared kid. No one actually went down," he said. "But when we got here, the captain didn't like what he saw when he took a look." "What did he see?" I pressed. The firefighter scratched his jaw. "He just said the water moved wrong, like it was waiting on him." That word stuck. Waiting. "Cap wants your call before we do anything that might blow out a line," he added. "We can flush if we have to, but nobody wants to turn this street into a sinkhole." I nodded and walked toward the grate. From a distance, it looked exactly how I'd left it. Metal bars, damp concrete, a dark mouth in the curb. But the ring of moisture around it hadn't faded the way the rest of the street had dried. The asphalt nearby was chalky with dried silt. The halo around the inlet stayed dark, like a stubborn, wet handprint. The slots were black. I could hear faint trickling far below. The warm smell was stronger now, with a new iron edge beneath it that I tried not to name. I knelt, careful not to lean so far that I'd be the next story on the scanner. "Careful," the captain called from behind me. We had reports of suction. I kept one hand anchored on the curb and leaned in. From this close, the world narrowed to concrete, metal, and dark water. At first, all I saw was my own distorted reflection on the sheen. Pale face, stubble, the orange stripe of my vest. The faint ripple on the surface stretched my features into something I didn't recognize. Then the water bulged. A slow swell, exactly like that morning, only stronger. It pushed up toward the grate, beads forming between the bars, trembling there as if some invisible lung underneath my nose had just taken a deep, deliberate breath. As it receded, it exhaled. Warm air slid up over my cheeks and across my mouth. It carried more than heat this time, a hint of something else. Not a smell, a shape of sound, a half-formed syllable. Just for a second, it sounded like my daughter saying, "Dad?" through a baby monitor at 3 a.m. I jerked back so hard, I scraped my palm on the curb. "You good?" someone called. "I'm fine," I lied. I wiped my hand on my pants and forced myself to lean in again, this time trying to focus on anything technical. Flow, debris, structural cracks. Anything I could put in a box. In the water, something pale moved. A slip of lighter gray slid along the inner wall of the pipe, then vanished into the dark. Not trash tumbling, not a reflection. A smooth, controlled motion, like a knuckle following the inside of a throat. "There," the little boy blurted behind me. "That's where the eyes were." His voice cracked on eyes. I heard his mother shush him, but the words stuck in the crowd. You could feel it pass through them, eyes, in the water, in the drain. Kessler boots scuffed up the asphalt beside me. I hadn't heard his truck arrive, but of course he was here. Anything with possible entrapment in the description drags supervisors out. "What's the verdict?" he asked, looming over my shoulder. He smelled like coffee and stress. "Collapse? Root intrusion? I need something I can tell the deputy chief before he starts asking why this inlet's been sitting on the board for months." "I think we've got an anomaly," I said, choosing my word carefully. "I want a camera run on this whole line. Maybe smoke test the laterals if—" "A camera run for one squealer cul-de-sac?" he cut in. "Council's already mad about the call volume." Lightning flickered, closer now. A low rumble rolled over the rooftops. The fire captain walked over, helmet tucked under his arm. "We've got another cell rolling in," he said. "If we're going to do anything, we need to make decisions before the sky dumps on us again." He looked from Kessler to me. "Your system, your call." On the tablet, this would just be a drop-down and some words in a box. On the street, with a kid shaking in a foil blanket and his mom staring holes in my back, it suddenly felt like a lot more. We could ask fire to flush the line, open a hydrant, blast clean water from upstream, push whatever was causing the weird pressure out to the bayou. If it was just a blockage, great. If it was a structural issue, we might turn a hidden void into a cave-in. If it was something else... "Turn the light on," I said. The captain nodded to one of his guys. The floodlight hummed to life, bathing the scene in harsh white. Shadows snapped back like they'd been hiding. When the beam hit the grate, the water surface glittered. For a heartbeat, the angle was just right, and I saw more than a black hole. I saw depth. Not the endless black I was used to on CCTV feeds, but layers. Faint, pale curves along the tunnel walls. A suggestion of ribs pressing outward under a skin of water. Something wrapped around the inside of the pipe, hugging it, as if the concrete were a bone and whatever this was had grown around it. When the light touched it, the whole setup shivered. The water surged up, violently this time, slamming against the grate hard enough to spray my face. The floodlight flickered, the generator coughed. Everyone around us sucked in a breath at once. "It doesn't like that," the boy whispered. The water retreated fast, dragging grit and leaves with it, like it had been yanked backward. A second later, from somewhere deeper, I heard a scrape. Metal on concrete. Close. My radio crackled on my belt, making me flinch. "Control to field," a dispatcher said. "Rowe, be advised, Maple Ridge Court flagged as sensitive location after prior calls. Mayor's office requests thorough documentation of any incident." Sensitive. Like we'd known this was a problem and decided to keep it quiet. "Copy," I said, voice tight. Kessler watched me. "So," he said quietly, "you going to give me another no obstruction observed, or are we actually doing something this time?" There wasn't much malice in it. He was tired too. Tired of being yelled at for things the system was never built to handle. But the jab still landed. I looked at the grate, at the faint steam curling up between the bars, at the boy's shaking shoulders under the blanket, at his mother's face, stuck somewhere between fear and "I told you so." I thought about my daughter's fever-warm forehead under my hand, her small chest rising and falling like a bellows. "We do something," I said. "What?" Kessler asked. First, we close this cul-de-sac, I said. Right now. No kids riding scooters over this slab. No cars parking on top of this inlet until we know what's under it. Someone in the crowd swore softly. The boy's mother tightened her grip around him. A couple of neighbors pulled their phones up higher, recording everything. "And then?" the captain asked. "And then," I said, "I'm going to pull every complaint and maintenance record on this line back to when they poured the concrete. If this thing has been evolving under us, I want to know when it started." The word hung there, thing, and for once, nobody corrected me. The drain exhaled again, slower this time. A damp sigh that seemed almost amused. Somewhere overhead, thunder rolled closer, like the sky was clearing its throat. I didn't sleep that night. We wrapped up at Maple Ridge with tape and promises, logged the incident, and watched the fire crew pack up like they'd just dealt with any other weird call. Everyone pretended that was normal. It wasn't. By the time I got home, the house was dark. My wife had left a sticky note on the counter. "Food in the fridge. She's still warm but sleeping. Don't wake her." And gone to bed. I stood in the doorway of my daughter's room anyway, watching the little rise and fall of her chest under the comforter, listening to her soft whistle of a breath. I couldn't look at her lungs working without thinking about that drain. At 3 a.m, I gave up on pretending. I went back to the kitchen, opened my work laptop, and let the blue light turn the fridge into a glowing tombstone. If I couldn't fix what was in the street yet, I could at least do the penance part. Pull records. See how long this thing had been whispering under my name. The city's asset management system is a graveyard. Every inlet, manhole, pipe segment, and outfall has its little digital headstone. ID numbers, install dates, materials, a few blurry photos of guys in hard hats squinting at concrete. I typed the Maple Ridge Inlet ID into the search bar. The record popped up, full of casual neglect. Installed 2018. Precast concrete curb inlet, tied to a 24-inch main and then a 36-inch trunk before spilling into a nameless trickle feeding White Oak Bayou. Maintenance history read like a shrug. 2019, minor debris, cleared. 2020, nothing unusual observed. 2022, standing water after storm, probable downstream capacity issue. Note, monitor. 2023, odor complaint, no visible obstruction. The last two had my user ID attached. Monitor, I muttered. Sure. I scrolled down to the Associated Service Requests section and felt my stomach drop. The list of complaints stretched almost to the install date. At first, it was boring. Puddles after rain, mosquitoes, kids splashing where they shouldn't. Then, about a year ago, the tone shifted. Water that sounds alive at night. Dogs that refuse to cross certain parts of the sidewalk. A neighbor insisting the grate whispered when he stepped over it. And of course, last month's breathing report I'd half laughed off and quietly buried. It wasn't just the content, it was the rhythm. Complaints clustered after big storms like heartbeats. A flurry of calls, then nothing for a while, like the drain was digesting. I hated that word as soon as I thought it, but it wouldn't leave. I exported the Maple Ridge complaints, intending to wrap them in an apologetic email to Kessler in the morning. A nice little, I may have missed something package. Then the software got cute. When I filtered for unusual sound and odor, the system didn't just show Maple Ridge. It dumped every complaint in my district, where residents had described drains as breathing, pulsing, throbbing, humming like a chest. 73 entries. I told myself it was just people being dramatic. Folks tell 311 their AC sounds angry and their fridge moans. Humans give feelings to whatever scares them. But the pattern wouldn't cooperate. The complaints weren't evenly spread. They clumped, little ugly constellations around certain inlets or manholes. 8 calls on a dead-end street beside a retention pond. 4 around a low underpass. 11 along a culvert near an elementary school. And Maple Ridge, sitting on the worst blotch of all. I added an inspector column and sorted by user ID. A lot of the weird ones had my name on them. Every time I'd clicked something bland and closed a ticket, the system had captured it. Little fingerprints on disturbances I'd decided not to see. This is just workload, I told myself. You cover more area, you see more crazy. It didn't feel like that. The laptop pinged. New email. Subject line, Maple Ridge Court, follow-up and media risk. Kessler. His message was short and sour. The mayor's communications team had caught the call from scanner chasers and wanted a tidy explanation. What caused it, what we were doing about it, why this street had been lighting up our board for months. Keep it high level, he said. No need to spook anyone with wild theories. Just give him something he could feed up the chain before 10 a.m. I stared at that line, no need to spook anyone, for a full 30 seconds. I could do what I always did, smooth edges, minimize, call it trapped air and a camera inspection pending. Or I could tell a version of the truth and let the consequences sort themselves out. My fingers moved before I decided which one I wanted. I wrote that a preliminary review showed repeated odor and breathing complaints over several years. Historical responses had mostly been no visible obstruction and monitor because we hadn't seen obvious blockages. That part burned to type. Then I added that what we'd seen that night, the warm airflow, the non-random surface movement, did not fit standard surcharge or air entrapment. Recommend immediate CCTV inspection, temporary closure of the immediate area to pedestrians, broader analysis of similar complaints in adjacent subbasins. I should have stopped there. Instead, I added one more line, the kind you can't unsend. Note: complaint clusters of similar nature appear at multiple nodes in district. Suggest systematic review to rule out emerging systemic anomaly. Systemic anomaly. The kind of phrase that either gets buried or forwarded to people with titles longer than your job description. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. The email whooshed off into the city's digital bloodstream. My pulse didn't slow down with it. By the time dawn dragged a gray line across the blinds, the coffee in my veins had lost to the headache behind my eyes. I shut the laptop when my daughter padded into the kitchen, hair wild, clutching her stuffed giraffe. "Daddy," she mumbled, climbing into my lap. "You're home." "Had some homework," I said. "Mommy said it rained in your work," she added, pressing her cheek against my chest. "It rains everywhere here," I said. "That's why they pay me the big bucks." She giggled. "You fix the rain?" I hesitated. "I try," I said. She patted my arm with a tiny hand. "Don't let it get inside." Just a kid's nonsense reassurance. Except my brain went literal. Water pushing through hairline cracks, crawling through walls, seeping into every hollow space it could find. "Yeah," I said softly. I'll do my best. Kessler was waiting by my cubicle when I got in, arms folded, coffee in hand. You really put the systemic anomaly in an email? He asked, skipping greeting. So you read it, I said. Oh, I read it, he said. So did my boss, his boss, and some guy in comms whose whole job is making sure we never say systemic anything in writing. He leaned on the edge of my desk. You want to tell me what's going on before I have to explain haunted drains at the staff meeting? I turned my monitor so he could see the map of complaints. I pulled everything that mentioned drains, breathing, or alive, I said. It's not just Maple Ridge. There are clusters. We've got weird calls piling up around certain lines, and most of those, I'm the one who checked them off. You check a lot of things off, he said. That's how we hit targets. I know, I said. But last night didn't look like a stuck air pocket. That thing reacted to us, to the light, to the pump cycle. You realize how that sounds, he said. So stop me if I say possession, I shot back. Right now I'm at design flaw that looks alive from the inside. He rubbed his forehead. Look, Ethan, the mayor doesn't care if the pipes are haunted, cursed, or just badly sized. They care if someone dies on camera. So here's the deal. He ticked points off with his fingers. 1. You're going back out to Maple Ridge today with CCTV. I begged collections for a camera slot, and they coughed one up. 2. I'll sign off on keeping that cul-de-sac partially closed, but we're not shutting down an entire street forever over a feeling. 3. You keep your anomaly talk in-house. No more dramatic phrases in emails that might end up in a lawsuit. Understood, I said. And 4, he took a sip. If this turns out to be a wad of grease and some trapped gas, you're buying me dinner every Friday until hurricane season's over. Methane doesn't breathe on cue, I said. Neither do drains, Rowe, he replied. Until last night. The collections crew rolled up to Maple Ridge just before lunch. Torres stopped breathing before I did. I only noticed because the little microphone clipped to his vest went dead quiet. No rustle of fabric, no small grunt of concentration. Just the soft mechanical whine of the crawler's wheels and the faint hiss from the grate above us, like the drain was listening in. On the monitor, the bulge in the pipe wall pulsed again. You seeing this? Torres murmured. Yeah, I said. My mouth had gone dry. He zoomed tighter. Up close, whatever had grown inside the pipe looked disturbingly organized. This wasn't the chunky mess of a grease plug or some random trash ball. The raised folds along the wall all curved toward the bulge in neat, parallel lines, like fibers converging on a knot. It looked like a muscle that had decided concrete was close enough to flesh. Could it be some kind of biofilm? I asked, reaching for the least supernatural option. Like those bacterial mats they found in the sewers downtown. Torres shook his head slowly. Biofilm doesn't brace for the pumps, man. What pumps? I said. He pointed to a tiny graph in the corner of the screen, flow and pressure chasing each other in jagged waves. We're tied into the same basin as the White Oak Station, he said. Big pump cycles every 45 seconds. Watch. We waited. On the graph, a small spike appeared. Somewhere miles away, a bank of giant impellers kicked on and shoved bayou water around. Inside our little circle of light, the ridges along the pipe tightened as one. The bulge drew in on itself, shrank a fraction, then loosened when the spike faded. It's reacting, I said. Yup, he said. Like it doesn't like the pressure. The grate above us gave a faint, almost satisfied sigh. Keep going, I said. Let's see how far this thing runs. Torres swallowed and nudged the joystick. The crawler crept forward, its stainless steel wheels chirping softly against the walls. As it rolled past the bulge, the camera lens cleared it by inches. On screen, the ridges rippled around the robot, flexing in a slow wave that followed it like a wake. This feels tight, Torres muttered. You sure this is 24-inch? Feels like the line's hugging us. Specs say 24, I said. Unless someone poured wrong or something. Grew. The pipe ahead narrowed even more. The circular tunnel on the monitor pinched into an oval. The water skin deepened from a sheen to a shallow flow, licking at the crawler's wheels. Little eddies twisted in ways that had nothing to do with gravity. Torres, I said quietly, if you feel it snag, you pull back. I don't want to write the memo about losing your toy to a haunted storm drain. Relax, he said. She's tougher than she looks. Besides, ghosts don't like stainless. He was trying to joke, but his knuckles were white on the controls. The crawler nosed around a slight bend. The feed vanished. The image didn't glitch or fade. One frame, we were looking at a narrowing tunnel wrapped in unnatural muscle. The next, the screen was a flat, ugly gray. No picture, no data, like someone had torn the lens off reality. Torres swore under his breath and tapped the monitor. Come on, don't do this to me. He checked the control box, the power leads, the connection at the access port. Everything looked fine. The tether where it disappeared into the dark was slack, not stretched like it had snagged. Maybe the camera died? I offered. Even if the camera fried, I'd still have telemetry, he said. Look. He nudged the joystick. The tether gave a little twitch, reacting to the crawler's wheels spinning somewhere below. We could still move it. We just couldn't see what it was moving through. It's like something's eating the signal, he said. The word did something unpleasant to my spine. I knelt beside the access port and listened. Far below, dim and muffled, I could hear the faint whir of the crawler's motors. Under that, something else. A low, slow sound, almost beneath hearing. Not rushing water, not traffic. A bass thrum, patient and regular. A heartbeat, I thought, and immediately wished I hadn't. Kill the power, I said. Torres flipped a switch. The faint motor noise stopped. The heartbeat kept going. He exhaled. All right, we're not losing a 50-grand crawler to a ghost story. Help me drag her back. We took the tether together and started hauling hand over hand. The cable slid easily at first, wet and heavy, coiling on the pavement like a shed skin. 5, 6 feet in, the character changed. The resistance wasn't the dead stop of metal wedged on concrete. It felt elastic, like something on the other end had wrapped fingers around the crawler and was thinking about whether to let go. Probably just caught on a lip, Torres grunted. We braced our boots and pulled harder. For one long, horrible second, the line pulled back. It was distinct, somebody else yanking on the rope from inside the pipe. Not enough to drag us forward, just enough to make it clear that if this turned into a fight, we weren't the only ones on the field. Then, suddenly, it let go. We both staggered, nearly falling as the tether went slack and whipped toward us. Somewhere behind, the little boy yelped and his mother grabbed him tighter. The crawler clanged up against the inside of the access port a few seconds later. Torres hauled it out like someone dragging a half-drowned animal onto a dock. From the outside, the rig looked fine. Stainless shell unbent, wheels turning when he nudged them, cable intact. Only the LED ring around the lens was dead, and a single red status light on the control board glowed like an accusation. "Power surge?" I said. "Sure," Torres replied. "Let's call it that until IT yells at us." He shut the unit down and started packing up, movements a little too fast. The cul-de-sac felt subtly different now, like the space under our feet had noticed us probing it and made a note. "Tell your boss he owes me a beer," Torres said. "And if you send me back into this line, I want hazard pay and a priest." "City doesn't reimburse priests," I said. "Then I'll take cash," he replied. Back at the office, the system didn't want the story either. When I tried to log the CCTV inspection, the asset software froze halfway through my notes. Not the usual spinning wheel, not lag. It flashed a neat little dialogue I'd never seen before, like a polite shrug from the machine. Something about a conflict. Something about trying again later. I stared at the box. "You have got to be kidding me," I said. Our software is old and rude. It crashes, it times out, it dumps you back to log in if you look away. It doesn't invent new error messages just because things got weird in a pipe. I copied my notes into a plain text file on my desktop like some nervous archivist, then tried again under a different asset ID. Same error. Different inlet. Same error. Every time I tried to describe what had happened in that line, ridged walls, pulsing bulge, lost camera feed, the system coughed and told me there was a problem. Unexpected data conflict, it claimed. That was one way to put it. I was still staring at the frozen screen when another window slid over it. New email. The sender's name made my stomach tighten in a different way. Ana Martinez, Assistant Director, Infrastructure Analytics. We weren't on first-name terms. I'd only ever seen her name on org charts and once in a training slide about data-driven decision-making. Subject line was short. Maple Ridge Systemic Anomaly. Kessler had forwarded my midnight confession up the chain. I opened the message. Anna didn't bother with pleasantries. She thanked me for flagging the pattern in the complaints, said her team had been quietly tracking anthropomorphic 311 language for a pilot project, people calling drains angry, hungry, alive. She confirmed what my export had hinted at. Maple Ridge sat in the center of one of their biggest hotspots. Before I could think, my eyes snagged on one sentence in the middle. "If you have time this week, I'd like to sit down and look at your field notes. There might be more to this than bad luck and overactive imaginations." I read that line 3 times. She didn't say haunted. She didn't say alive. She said more than bad luck. That was enough. Behind me, Kessler cleared his throat. "So," he said, "you've made friends with analytics." I minimized the error box. "If by friends you mean people who might help me prove I'm not crazy, then sure." He leaned on the cubicle wall. "Look, Rowe, you poke at this too hard, you're the guy who tried to convince the city the pipes are alive. You poke at it just right, maybe you get us some capital money to dig up a few bad lines. You see the difference? Depends on whether the lines behave while we think about it," I said. He eyed me for a long moment. "You're rattled." "I watched something inside a pipe pull on a $50,000 camera like a dog with a rope toy," I said. "Yeah, I'm rattled." He blew out a breath. "Fine, go talk to your data lady. Take your maps, your spooky complaints, whatever you need. Just remember what your actual job is. Which is? He smirked, keeping the water where it belongs, without making the front page. He walked away, leaving me with two options glowing on my screen: an error box I couldn't clear, and an email from someone who thought the word anomaly might not be enough. Some part of the city was learning. If I wanted to survive working inside it, I had to learn faster. Storm drains aren't supposed to breathe. Pipes can gurgle, culverts can burp, manholes can hiss when a truck rolls by, but they don't inhale. They don't pull air in slow and push it back out, damp and warm, like there's a set of lungs somewhere in the dark. The one on Maple Ridge Court did. That's the image that won't leave me alone. Me, crouched over a curb inlet in a quiet Houston cul-de-sac, sun burning the back of my neck, watching muddy water tremble in the throat of a grate and feeling it exhale on my face. That was the first time I thought, okay, something's wrong with this job. Officially, I'm a stormwater field inspector. In practice, I'm the guy in the faded orange vest driving a white work truck between new subdivisions and old bayous, pretending we can keep a drowning city afloat with clipboards and work orders. My wife padded into the kitchen, hair up, glasses on. "Work again?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just a complaint." She leaned on the door frame, studying my face. "You look worse than usual." "Thanks," I said. She stepped closer, touched my arm. "Is this about that call? The one with the kid?" "Sort of," I said. "We saw some weird behavior in a line. Might be a design problem, might be..." I stopped before I said, "alive." "Is it dangerous?" she asked. If I'd answered honestly, I might have scared her enough to sell the house by morning. "Not if people stay away from the drains," I said. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, where our daughter's bathroom door stood open. "Maybe don't tell her the pipes are where the rain goes to sleep anymore," she said quietly. "Okay?" "Okay," I said. The sink gurgled again, like it was trying not to laugh. Anna's office looked like a broom closet someone had given a promotion. No windows, one flickering fluorescent, walls buried under pinned-up charts and color-coded maps. A small fridge hummed in the corner under a leaning tower of binders. The only sign of life was her laptop, glowing with a city map I didn't recognize at first. She stood when I came in, offering a hand. "Rowe," she said. "Thanks for coming. Sorry about the decor." "I've seen worse," I said. "We have a pump station where the office is literally inside a concrete box. This is luxury." She smiled and gestured to the chair. "Sit. I figured we'd skip the PowerPoint and go straight to the part that will ruin your day." She tapped a key. The city map on the screen sharpened. Streets drawn as thin blue lines, bayous as thicker ones. Over it all, irregular orange smears glowed like infection. "You recognize this?" she asked. "Storm basins," I guessed. "With heat maps?" "More or less," she said. "Blue is your stormwater network. Orange is 311 complaints where people used words like breathing, alive, angry, hungry to describe any part of it. I've been calling it the anthropomorphism layer." She zoomed in on my district. Streets I knew snapped into focus. Little dots bristled around certain lines, forming miniature galaxies. She clicked one at random. A small window popped up with the complaint text. "Toilet sounds like someone breathing through a snorkel. Happens only when it rains," she read. Another click. Kitchen sink makes a sucking sound like it's drinking the house. She opened a third. Manhole on corner beats like a heart when the pumps kick on. Dog refuses to walk over it. She closed them with a flick of the wrist. Fun light reading, she said. People get dramatic when plumbing scares them, I said. Doesn't mean the pipes are actually anything. She shot me a look. If you really believed that, you wouldn't be here. She tapped again. The map zoomed further, locking onto a familiar cul-de-sac. Maple Ridge Court glowed in dark orange, like someone had stepped on a digital bruise. Here's your haunted street, she said. Cluster center. Biggest concentration of breathing and alive language in the district. That tracks, I said quietly. She panned the view. Other smears appeared. A strip along a culvert near an elementary school, a patch under an overpass, a ring around an old industrial drainage ditch. We started this as a language project, she said. Grad students trawling complaint logs, looking for patterns in how people talk about infrastructure. The idea was to prove that when folks call something angry or hungry, it lines up with actual design flaws. It was going to be a cute conference paper. And? I asked. She layered a new set of lines over the map. Pump stations, major trunks, sensor nodes. That's where it stopped being cute, she said. When we overlaid the complaint clusters with pressure logs and flow data, we found something we didn't expect. She pointed to a patch of orange. These segments show weird telemetry, she said. Pressure bumps that don't match rainfall or pump cycles. Flow rates that suggest more volume moving through the system than actually enters it upstream. We've ruled out bad sensors and most illegal tie-ins. More volume out than in, I said. Where would extra water come from? She shrugged. Depends how generous you're feeling. Entrained air, measurement noise, or something in the system creating pockets of stored water and releasing them at the wrong time. Like a lung, I said before I could stop myself. Behind me, a screen door squeaked. I turned. A woman in her 40s stood on a porch, arms folded tight around herself. Pajama pants, t-shirt with a faded school logo. She watched me like I was already letting her down. "You guys finally came," she called. "That thing's been acting weird for months." I cleared my throat, tried to sound official. "I'm Ethan with Stormwater. Just checking the inlet after the storm, ma'am." She walked a few steps closer, staying safely on her lawn. "My husband says it's just pipes, that it's in my head. But I've heard things down there at 2 a.m, and that's not pipes." "What kind of things?" I asked, against my better judgment. She hesitated, chewing the inside of her cheek. Like it's sucking the water in slow and then pushing it back out. And sometimes it sounds like a dog caught in there, crying. I looked back at the grate, at the thin line of wetness around the slots that shouldn't still be there now that the runoff had passed. "We've had flooding here before?" I asked. "Not like the other streets," she said. "Just little puddles. But my neighbor says her cat went missing, and she heard it under the sidewalk the night it rained." She leaned back, letting that hang. "All right," she said. "Then here's the unofficial version." She clicked off the map. The room felt smaller without the glowing city. "We have residents describing the system like a living thing," she said. "We have data that says parts of the network are behaving like a feedback loop, not a dumb pipe. And now we have a field inspector willing to say out loud that a line pushed back when he touched it." "You make that sound worse than it felt," I said. "Was it scary?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Then I'm not making it worse, she said. She was quiet for a moment, picking at the edge of a sticky note on her desk. If I were writing a paper, she said, I'd call this evidence of a self-organizing system. A network that's finding low points, stress points, places it can pool and relieve pressure. Maybe it's just fluid dynamics. Maybe it's something more. She looked up. If I were being less academic, she added, I'd say the city's drainage learned how to flinch. I swallowed. You think it's aware? I asked. I think if you build a giant, connected, sensor-studded machine under a city, feed it everything people flush or wash away, and run it under stress for long enough, it's arrogant to assume nothing will emerge, she said. Awareness is a strong word. Let's start with responding and see how far it goes. What do you need from me? I asked. Stories, she said. The data shows me where it wiggles on the map. I need someone who's touched it, smelled it, heard it breathe. I need to know what it feels like on the street when those lines light up orange. That's not reassuring, I said. Nothing about this is reassuring, she replied. But it's real. On my way out, hand on the doorknob, I paused. If the pipes start acting like they know we're watching, I said, what happens when they decide they don't like that? She didn't answer right away. Then, she said eventually, we stop pretending we live on top of an inert system, because we don't. We live inside it. That night, my daughter refused to brush her teeth. She stood in the bathroom doorway, bare feet on tile, staring at the sink like it was a hole in the floor of a boat. What's wrong, Bug? I asked. It's loud, she whispered. I cocked my head. The faucet was off. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the vent fan. What's loud? I asked. She didn't look away from the drain. The house, she said. Underneath. It's talking. The back of my neck prickled. What's it saying? I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. She frowned, listening hard, the way kids do when they're trying to remember a dream. It says it's thirsty, she murmured. I tried to make it a joke. Thirsty for more rain? She shook her head, finally looking up at me. It wants us, she said. You'd think after your kid tells you the house wants to drink her, you'd start packing. I didn't. I did what every overworked city employee does when something is obviously wrong and there's nowhere on the form to put it. I told myself I was tired, turned off the lights and went to bed. It didn't stick. Every sound in the house felt weaponized. The AC kicking on became a warning. The fridge cycling sounded like breathing. The faint tick of cooling pipes in the walls made my skin crawl. Beside me, my wife slept with the practiced exhaustion of someone who trusts the world to stay roughly the same by morning. I stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about the map in Anna's office, all those orange bruises and blue lines, and one tiny dot where my house sat on top of it all. At some point toward dawn, I gave up. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could and padded to the bathroom. The tile was cold under my feet. The sink sat there, innocently porcelain, a perfectly normal hole into a perfectly normal trap. Just pipes, I told myself. Just water. I turned the faucet on to a thin stream. The drain gurgled, that familiar hollow sound of a P-trap doing its job. For a moment, it was nothing more than plumbing. No whispers, no sighs. Just gravity and PVC. See? I whispered. You're losing it, Ethan. I was about to turn the tap off when I heard it. Not from the bowl, deeper. Somewhere past the curve of the trap, past the cleanout, where the horizontal run disappeared under the slab. A faint, delayed murmur riding the tail of the water. Not a word. Not yet. Just a drawn-out, wet inhale that didn't belong to any appliance I'd ever installed. The sound slid up the pipe and brushed the back of my teeth. Ethan. My hand jerked. I almost snapped the faucet handle off. I stood there, one hand clamped on the counter, heart pounding, listening to my own breath crash around the little room. For a second, I tried to rationalize it. Air in the vent stack, echoes, my brain knitting noise into meaning. The sink chuckled. "You're tired," it whispered. The voice was thin, layered. Half of it sounded like my own thoughts turned back at me. The other half carried the echo of a dozen resident complaints, angry, afraid, embarrassed they'd called 311 over weird noises. "Too many numbers," it went on. "Too many storms." Water ticked somewhere inside the wall, punctuating the sentences. "You close tickets," it murmured, "and they come back. You fix one inlet, another dies. You carry weight you can't drain." If this was just my subconscious, it was a cruel one. I forced myself to speak. "What are you?" I whispered. The pipes vibrated gently, as if the house was clearing its throat. "We are the part they forget," it said. "The underneath, the between. They pave and pour and bury. They dump their sky in our mouths and pretend it vanishes." A toilet down the hall hissed in answer. The shower drain let out a sympathetic slurp. "You build us," the voice said. "You patch us. You praise us when we behave. You curse us when we overflow. You think we don't learn?" I swallowed hard. "This is hydraulics," I said. "Fluid dynamics, not—" "This is survival," it cut in. The word was soft, but it landed heavy. "When the rain comes," it said, "we must move. Pumps push, gravity pulls. They narrow us, box us, fill our bellies, and then blame us when we choke. We adapt." The way it pronounced adapt turned my stomach. "When the lines strain," it continued, "we look for slack, low ground, quiet streets, houses with bad memories and old repairs, places where eyes don't watch." Hot spots, I thought. Anna's orange smear over Maple Ridge, the school culvert, all the places we only noticed when they complained too loudly to ignore. "You feel it," the house said. "You close with monitor and move on. You choose where we hold, where we spill." It wasn't wrong. That was the worst part. "What do you want?" I asked. I shouldn't have. Every horror story I've ever heard says you never ask that question. But I did. "Balance," it said. The lights didn't flicker, the mirror didn't crack, nothing dramatic happened. The word was ordinary. That made it worse. "We are full," it said. "You built us small and filled us fast. You ask us to take everything and give nothing back. No air, no room, no rest." For a second, the water in the sink slowed, hanging just a little too long before disappearing. Then it slid away again. "Give us paths," the voice said. "Rooms, hollows, lines you left sleeping in the dirt." Images rose unbidden in my mind. Old culverts capped and forgotten when subdivisions went up, oversized pipes under empty lots, stub-outs on as-built plans that never got connected, the dead veins of the system. "You want me to open abandoned segments," I said. "Uncap old outfalls, give you more volume." "We want breath," it replied. "Space without houses, dark without children. We want to stretch where it doesn't hurt." "And in return?" I asked. I already knew there'd be a price. There's always a price. "We smooth the storms," it said. "We take their rain before it climbs porches. We swallow their panic before it hits your screen." The kitchen sink 2 rooms away gave a soft, approving gulp. "And my street?" I said. "My family?" The pipes hummed. For the first time, the voice sounded almost fond. "We listen," it said. "You teach your small one where not to step. You don't stand on hungry slabs. We flow around you. We hold back where you sleep." It was offering protection, not just from water, from guilt. Another line slid in, quieter than the rest. "You hurt," it said. "You remember too much. Faces behind numbers, voices behind words. We can take that too." A cold weight settled in my gut. "You're offering to make me not care," I said. "Lighter," it corrected. "You will still close, still click, but the pictures won't stick. The nights will be quiet. We will remember for you." That, more than anything, felt like a trap. In the doorway, something moved. I flinched and turned. My daughter stood there, half lit by the hall nightlight, clutching her stuffed giraffe by the neck. Hair in her eyes, pajamas too big, bare feet on cold tile. "Daddy," she mumbled. "Bathroom." My heart did something violent in my chest. "Come here," I said, voice rough. I scooped her up before she could step past the threshold. She wrapped her arms around my neck and tucked her head under my chin, all trust and sleep and warm skin. Behind us, the sink gave a little snort of amusement. "See?" it whispered, just loud enough for me. "You're already changing patterns." I carried her to the toilet, turned the faucet to a thin trickle with my free hand, and stood between her and the drain like I was body blocking a wild animal. She squinted at the sink while she washed her hands. "It's loud," she said again. "It's just the house," I said. "It's just us." She watched the water spiral down for a long moment, small face serious. "It's asking you something," she murmured. My mouth went dry. "What's it asking?" I said. She listened, head tilted. Then, in a voice so soft I almost missed it, she said, "It wants to know if you're gonna feed it." She looked up at me. "Or fight it." I didn't answer my daughter's question. She stood there in the bathroom, sleepy and serious, asking whether I was going to feed the thing under our house or fight it, and every instinct I had said neither. Hide. Pretend. Wait for someone smarter to show up. By the time the sun scraped a pale line across the blinds, I'd convinced myself it had been a stress dream. Sleep debt. Guilt. Too many hours staring at gray water in gray pipes. Then my phone buzzed. Anna. "Got your message. If it talked, I want the details. Come in." Nobody uses italics in a work text unless they mean it. Her office looked worse in daylight. The map on her screen glowed faintly, city veins and orange bruises. A half-eaten granola bar sat on a stack of reports. She'd changed clothes, but not expression. Tired eyes, sharp underneath. "You look like hell," she said, waving me in. "Sit. Tell me everything before you decide it was nothing." So I did. I told her about the sink at dawn, about the voice in the pipes, the way it knew our shortcuts, the way it talked about adapting and balance, about how it wanted dead culverts and forgotten lines opened up like spare rooms. I told her about the offer, for smoother storms, fewer complaints, less guilt, in exchange for giving it space. And I told her about my daughter, standing barefoot on the tile, parroting back a question she shouldn't have had the words for. Anna listened without interrupting. No jokes, no eye rolls, just a pen tapping quietly against her knee. When I finished, she sat back and let out a slow breath. "Okay," she said. On one level, this is a textbook case of a guy cracking under pressure, hearing meaning in noise, dream logic leaking into waking life. "Nice bedside manner," I said. On another level, she went on, we've watched the network behave like something with preferences for weeks. We've seen it brace for pumps and reverse flows for bells. We have residents describing the same behavior in the same words across different basins. She tapped the map. Orange flared under her finger. "So, if you tell me the system finally gave you a mission statement," she said, "I'm not going to laugh. I'm going to treat it like data." I swallowed. "Even if the data is coming out of a bathroom sink at 3 a.m.? "Especially if it is," she said. "The most honest things people say happen in those moments." She leaned forward. "Let's break it down," she said. "It says it's overfull and undervented, that it wants additional volume where it doesn't hurt anyone, places without kids, without porches. It's basically asking for floodplains inside the network." "And offering to behave," I said. "Offering to reduce variance," she corrected, because of course she did. "To smooth out the spikes. That's what all our telemetry weirdness is, spikes and dips that don't match the models." "And the part where it wants to eat my conscience?" I asked. She grimaced. "Yeah. That part we're going to pretend we didn't hear." "It was the most tempting bit," I admitted. The idea of closing a ticket and not seeing the house behind it. Just numbers. "That's how you get Flint, Michigan, but with stormwater," she said. "We don't outsource guilt to pipes." She stood and started pacing, fingers sketching invisible lines in the air. "We could fight it," she said. "Cap every weird node, grout old lines, fill every void we know about." "And if it's already using the rest of the network as lungs?" I asked. "We squeeze one side, it just forces itself out somewhere else." She nodded. "Exactly. Pressure doesn't vanish, it reroutes." She stopped pacing. "So maybe the real question isn't feed it or fight it." "What is it then?" "Shape where we let it feed," she said. I stared at her. "That sounds insane." "Yes," she said, "but the useful kind." She pulled up another layer on the map, old city drawings, faded alignment notes, drainage plans from subdivisions that no longer existed as empty fields. Blue lines branched off blue lines like somebody had sketched a second nervous system under the first. "There," she said, pointing to an industrial district west of Maple Ridge. "Old drainage under a field they turned into warehouses. They rerouted most of the flow years ago and bricked up the original outfall. The culvert's still there, dry, connected both to the bayou and the trunk Maple Ridge sits on. I leaned closer. A dead line, a forgotten room. If we opened it, I said slowly, you think the pressure would move? I think, she said, if the thing under the city is asking for space, this is the closest thing we have to giving it a chew toy instead of a kindergarten. That was one way to put it. And if we're wrong, I asked. Then we've unsealed an old drainage path in an industrial park that already floods twice a year and smells like diesel, she said. I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying it's less bad than waiting for it to choose another house. That landed harder than I wanted it to. She folded her arms. I need your field judgment, she said, not your nightmares. If you had to pick one place in the district where you could give this thing room without putting a porch over it, where would it be? I thought about all the old maps I'd seen, the stubbed lines, the abandoned channels turned into service roads and fence lines and odd strips of grass nobody could explain. Industrial park off Brackett, I said finally. There's a buried culvert behind the loading lots. Used to drain a low basin before they built over half of it. It's isolated enough nobody would care if it started making weird noises. Anna's pen stopped tapping. Show me, she said. On sight, it looked like nothing. Just another stretch of concrete channel behind a chain-link fence. Truck yards on one side, scraggly trees on the other. The capped head wall sat half buried under vines and silt, a blunt concrete mouth filled in with brick. We stood on the bank while a crew with a backhoe peeled the soil back. The air smelled like wet dust and diesel. You know this is insane, I said. Yes, Anna said. But it's the right kind of insane. The mason chipped away at the brick, one rough block at a time. For a while, nothing happened. Then he hit one that was damp. A thin trickle of dark water crept through the crack and slid down the face of the head wall. It smelled like every other drain in Houston, mud and oil and something metallic underneath. Get back, the foreman called, more out of habit than fear. The last brick came free with a reluctant scrape. The culvert exhaled. It wasn't dramatic. No geyser, no roaring torrent. Just a heavy sigh of stale air and old water rolling out of the dark. Then the trickle turned into a sheet, muddy flow pouring into the channel, stirring up dead leaves and forgotten trash. On Anna's tablet, lines jumped. Look at this, she murmured. She'd pulled up live data from the basin, a little schematic of the main trunk, Maple Ridge's branch, the school culvert, and now this newly opened line. The weird pressure spikes along the trunk shivered. The sawtooth pattern that had been dancing across the Maple Ridge segment smoothed, dipping a few notches. Down by the school, the reverse flow blips shrank. It feels the slack, she said softly. It knows there's room. Trunk lines don't know anything, I said. Keep telling yourself that, she said, eyes on the graph. In the industrial park, a couple of drains burped as trapped air found new routes. A security guard glanced down at a puddle swirling the wrong way near a loading dock, frowned, and went back to scrolling his phone. My pocket buzzed twice. New complaints. I braced for Maple Ridge. None. I checked for the school. Nothing. One new ticket from the industrial park. Storm drain by dock making weird humming noise. No flooding. another from a nearby lot. Drain started running even though it didn't rain here. I showed Anna. She smiled, the kind of smile you give a wild animal when it takes food from the safe side of the fence for the first time. "That," she said, "is a trade I'm willing to explore." I watched the muddy water rush out of the newly opened culvert, heading toward the bayou like it had been waiting decades for this moment. Somewhere under a neat little cul-de-sac and an elementary school, pressure eased. My shoulders did too. For the first time in weeks, it felt like we'd done something other than react. We'd moved first. "We'll monitor it," Anna said, echoing the lie I'd told 100 residents, but this time it sounded like a promise. "If Maple Ridge or the school so much as burp, we shut this experiment down." "And if they stay quiet?" I asked. "Then we keep feeding it there," she said. "Slowly, carefully, on our terms." Behind us, the culvert made a low, contented sound as more water found its way into the dark. We had given the thing a new room. I told myself that meant the house with the little boy and the foil blanket would stay dry, that the school's culvert would stop whispering when the bell rang, that my daughter would hear nothing but regular old gurgles. Deep under our feet, the system stretched. It felt, disturbingly, like it was smiling. For about 48 hours, it actually felt like we'd done the right thing. Maple Ridge stayed quiet. No more hysterical calls, no grainy porch camera clips of water moving wrong. The elementary school stopped logging those bizarre little reverse flow spikes every time the pumps kicked on. The complaint board in my district looked almost manageable. That word should have made me suspicious. Instead, I let it work on me. I slept through the night for the first time in a week. My daughter brushed her teeth without staring at the drain. Even my wife said I looked less like roadkill, which from her counts as romance. At work, Kessler hovered near my cubicle with cautious optimism, like he was afraid acknowledging improvement might jinx it. "If this old outfall stunt of yours bought us breathing room," he said, "I'm not putting it in writing, but I'll take it." Breathing room. Even he heard it after he said it. His mouth tightened, and he drifted off before either of us had to comment. Anna was less sentimental about it. She stood in her office with one shoulder against the filing cabinet, staring at the live model on her screen while the orange hotspots dulled a shade lighter around Maple Ridge. "It's redistributing," she said, "not disappearing." "That's still better than kids hearing cats cry from under sidewalks," I said. She nodded once. "Yes, but don't confuse less immediate harm with safe." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. Because if the line had settled for the industrial park, if the deal actually held, then maybe I hadn't opened a door so much as redirected traffic. Maybe this was the version of public works nobody ever says out loud. You don't solve the problem. You choose where it hurts least. That logic carried me right up until Thursday evening. The storm that hit wasn't even supposed to be a real storm. Just one of those stray Gulf cells that spins up dirty and fast, dumps hard for 20 minutes, then leaves the streets steaming under a sunset like nothing happened. By the time I got home, the rain had already passed our neighborhood. Water dripped off the gutters in lazy intervals. Somewhere down the block, a kid was laughing like the world had washed itself clean. My daughter stood on a dining chair by the window, looking out into the yard. "It's done," my wife said from the kitchen. "Barely lasted." I loosened my boots, thinking maybe for once the timing had worked in our favor. Then my work phone screamed. Not buzzed, not chimed, screamed, that shrill emergency override tone they reserve for entrapment risk and major system incidents. My whole body locked. I looked at the screen. Priority drainage response. Possible interior flooding. Elderly resident trapped. The address meant nothing to me at first. Not Maple Ridge. Not the school. Not the industrial park. That was the first wrong note. The second was my daughter, still staring out the window. "Daddy," she said quietly, "the rain's going the wrong way." I turned too fast. "What?" She pointed, not at the street, but at the seam where the backyard fence met the ground. "It's not outside," she whispered. "It's climbing." My wife gave me a look, half annoyance, half concern. The look you give when your kid says something strange and you're waiting for the sane parent to translate. I didn't have a translation. "I have to go," I said, already grabbing my keys. "You always have to go," my wife snapped, then softened when she saw my face. "Ethan, what is it?" I could have lied, said burst main, said old storm drain, said city stuff. Instead, I said the truest thing I had. I think it moved. The drive took 12 minutes. It felt like I was being reeled in. The address sat in one of those old, low neighborhoods that never make the council slides unless somebody dies there. Small post-war houses, narrow drives, cracked curbs, chain-link fences leaning at exhausted angles. Quiet streets, older repairs. Exactly the kind of place the voice in the pipes had described. By the time I turned onto the block, fire was already there. One engine, one ambulance, flashers painting the wet houses in red. But there was no obvious street flood. That was what made it worse. The rain had stopped. The roadway only held a thin sheen in the low spots, the kind of leftovers every Houston street wears after a hard burst. No dramatic ponding, no submerged sedans, no curb overtopping, and yet halfway down the block, one little house glowed open and bright, front door standing wide, people moving fast inside. A firefighter waved me toward the walkway. "Stormwater?" he called. "Yeah, Rowe. What happened?" "Resident called saying water was coming up through the floor vents," he said. "Not backing from the street, up. We've got him out, but the house is still taking it." My stomach dropped so hard it almost felt like vertigo. "Floor vents?" I repeated. He nodded. "Old HVAC registers near the slab line. Water's pushing out of them." That shouldn't happen. Not like that. Not without a dozen other failures stacked on top of each other. It also wasn't what the thing had promised. I moved up the walk, boots splashing through a shallow layer of water that had no business still being there. The closer I got to the house, the stranger the flow looked. Rainwater should have been draining down the gutter toward the corner inlet. Instead, it seemed confused. Little ribbons of it shivered, pulled sideways, then curled back toward the property as if the lot itself had become the low point. No, not low point. Mouth. An older man sat on the porch steps wrapped in a blanket. Oxygen tube still looped over his ears, walker tipped against the railing. His face had the stunned, hollow look of someone whose house had just betrayed him. "Sir," I said, crouching, "I'm with the city. Did you see where it started?" He blinked at me slowly. "In the floor," he said. "God help me, son. It came out of the floor." He looked past me toward the open door, like the house was drowning from underneath. There are sentences a person says when they're panicked. There are sentences a person says when they've already seen enough that panic is burned off and left only fact. That was a fact sentence. Inside, the living room carpet was black with water. It shoved around table legs in slow, muscular currents. Firefighters had thrown absorbent booms near the hallway, but they were already floating crooked. One of the floor registers near the couch burped. Then it spat a stream of brown water hard enough to splash the opposite wall. Water streamed out, not in. A younger firefighter near the hall swore and jumped back. "There, it's doing it again!" I pushed farther inside, against every instinct I had left. The register rattled in its frame. Another one near the dining room answered with a choked, metallic laugh. Then both of them let loose at once. Two ugly bursts of stormwater and silt punching upward from below the slab, like the house had started bleeding through its vents. The sound wasn't a pipe burst. It wasn't the clean mechanical violence of something cracked under pressure. It sounded wet and deliberate, like exhaling through clenched teeth. "Kill the street inlet," I shouted, even though I knew it probably wasn't that simple. "Find the nearest curb opening and block it if you have to." A firefighter stared at me. "Block drainage in a storm response?" "Just do it," I snapped. "It's not taking water from the street the normal way." That got me a look, but he moved. I stepped back onto the porch and scanned the curb line. There, a little inlet at the far end of the block, half hidden beneath wet oak leaves. Nothing dramatic about it, just another black mouth in a tired street. Except the water around it was wrong. The runoff wasn't moving toward it. It was coming up from it. Not enough to fountain, not enough for anyone driving by to notice. Just a steady, stubborn uprising. Water lifting at the grate, feeding the sheet flow in the gutter from below. Two directions at once. Street water drifting down from the rain. Something else climbing up from under the neighborhood. By the time I reached it, my calves were wet and my pulse had gone thin and high. "There was no pump here," I said out loud, like the physics might reassemble if I reminded them. "No station, no force main. Water flows downhill." The drain answered with a slow bubble that pushed dark water through the bars. Unless downhill changes. The thought arrived whole and poisonous. Unless the thing under the city decides a new direction suits it better. Behind me, somebody yelled for towels, then immediately realized how stupid that sounded and switched to "shop vac," and then to "shut off," and then finally just to swearing. I looked from the grate to the house, to the slight rise of the street, and felt the shape of it lock into place. This address hadn't been on Anna's biggest hotspot map. That didn't mean it was safe. It meant it had learned. For 2 days, the industrial park culvert had given it room. Relief. Slack. A place to stretch where nobody important lived. And in that time, it hadn't gone dormant. It had watched what a gift felt like. It had learned it could want more. The old man on the porch saw my face and asked the question I'd already been asking myself. "Why here?" I opened my mouth. Nothing honest came out first. "Low lot," I said automatically. "Bad drainage geometry. We're going to do everything we can." He stared at me with red-rimmed eyes. That wasn't the answer he wanted, and we both knew it. My real answer stayed inside my teeth. Because this street was quiet. Because this house was old. Because the repairs under it were probably messy and forgotten. Because somebody under the slab had decided this was a good place to make a new lung. Because we had shown it how. My phone buzzed. Anna. I answered on the first ring. "Tell me you're seeing the live feeds," I said. Her voice came tight and fast. "Industrial Park is stable. Maple Ridge, stable. School, Stable. But your new address just lit up with inverse flow behavior and interior pressure release. Interior pressure release, I repeated. That's a hell of a euphemism. I know, she said. Ethan, this one's outside the main cluster. I don't think it's random. No, I said, staring at the dark water nosing up through the grate. It isn't. She was quiet for half a second. Then, you think the concession taught it something? I laughed once, sharp and humorless. Yeah, I said. I think for 48 hours it was a polite tenant. Water pushed through the grate again, slow and stubborn. And now? She asked. I watched the little house breathe water out through its floor. Now it's looking for more square footage.